Hello and welcome to Cigar, Coffee and Books. The Value of Others, Part 6. This is a book by Dr. Orion Taraban, understanding the economic model of relationships to get and keep more of what you want in the sexual marketplace. I will be smoking a signature of leaf-rolled cigars. The signature of leaf-rolled cigars. In 1963, Signature created the world's first small cigar under the house of Café Crème. Ever since, Signature has been crafting the smoking experience through high-quality tobacco blends rolled in thoroughly selected leaf wrappers. From seed to cigar, we guarantee high quality. That is our signature. My hands are dirty because I've been working the fields. Right. Oops, a bit sideburnt. Oh well. And a black coffee. Check out the link below to see what other cool animal skulls I have in store on my Etsy shop. This is a sheep from Wales. I also have deer with antlers. I also have miniature squirrel skulls and various things. Now, onto the book. The eye of the beholder. People don't just make their decisions in the sexual marketplace based on NSMV, and this becomes increasingly true in the context of mating or long-term relationships. That's my dog Isaac, by the way. Yes, he's going to be ripping apart cushions and sticks. For instance, men very well might choose to enter into a short-term sexual relationship with a woman based primarily or even exclusively on her physical appearance. However, fewer men would elect to start a family with a woman on these grounds alone. The more significant the relationship, the more other standards are brought to bear. By the same token, many women have checklists with respect to what they are explicitly looking for in a long-term relationship, in a long-term partner. For instance, they might want a handsome man with a good job who is loyal and caring and family-orientated. That said, women don't actually enter into a relationship on the basis of a consciously extrapolated rationale, and they won't offer sexual opportunity purely as a response to the satisfaction of their criteria. If their attraction is high enough, they might dispense with their checklists entirely. And if their attraction is too low, they may create new criteria that suddenly need to be fulfilled. In most cases, the satisfaction of a certain proportion of a woman's criteria is a necessary but insufficient prerequisite to securing a relationship with her. At the end of the day, it's attraction that runs the show, and the perception of value that calls the shots behind the scenes. And this is why I call the individual elements that constitute the ideas upon which normalized sexual marketplace value is based attraction proxies. Many men and women believe that if they only possessed these elements in greater quality or quantity, they would more effortlessly attract more desirable partners. And while possession of these proxies will likely improve their overall optionality in the sexual marketplace, possession doesn't, in and of itself, guarantee either a sexual opportunity or a committed relationship from any person in particular. For instance, things like a bigger bank account or larger breasts are attraction proxies because while they will likely improve a given individual's NSMV in general, they are too often utilized as substitutes for attraction in particular. The fallacy is to believe that since, statistically speaking, women prefer wealthier men, or men prefer women with larger breasts, you will be more attractive to the specific individual you are dealing with, simply as a consequence of having a higher net worth or a larger cup size. And this belief is especially insidious because it can lead people to think that they don't need to do anything else to cultivate attraction should they succeed in possessing the proxy. Neither of these beliefs is necessarily true. You can't have a relationship with an abstraction like men or women. You can only have a relationship with a particular man or a particular woman. And these particular individuals can and do have interests and preferences that deviate significantly from the cultural ideal. This is why, in interactions down on the dock, normalized sexual marketplace value doesn't matter nearly as much as perceived sexual marketplace value, or PSMV. That's the second thing I was mentioning. I can't remember the name of a word for when you use letters to stand for something, not initials, but... So here's a new one. It's backwards, but PSMV. Perceived sexual marketplace value. This is true for several reasons. First, it is very difficult to evaluate the character or even the net worth of another person, and it absolutely cannot be done on sight. That said, if appearances don't succeed in sufficiently stimulating attraction, few people will put in the time and energy required to do the assay. In this way, we can certainly imagine a man who, according to the standards of his culture, has an objectively high SNMV, e.g., high net worth, interesting lifestyle, powerful position, but who is consistently passed over for sexual relationships, because he doesn't present himself in a way that makes his value observable to women. He will be treated in accord with the PSMV associated with him in the minds of the women who observe him, not according to some objective metric that, ironically, they cannot see. It is PSMV consisting, as it does, of the perception of value that will be instrumentally related to these women's attraction or lack thereof. The discrepancy between NSMV and PSMV affects women less intensely. This is because their normalized sexual marketplace values are principally derived from alignment with certain standards of physical attractiveness, which tends to be more immediately recognizable. That said, women get a taste of the gap with which men must constantly contend when they experience a change in perceived interest as a consequence of wearing makeup or dressing in certain ways. Hey, bud. Yes, hello. No, I don't want to be eaten right now. I'm trying to read. That said, women get a taste of the gap with which men must constantly contend when they experience a change in perceived interest as a consequence of wearing makeup or dressing in certain ways. However, since these behaviors are generally designed to approximate certain beauty standards by, say, manipulating the shape of the body or obscuring signs of age, women's gaps move in the opposite direction from men's. As a result, a given woman's PSMV is more likely to be higher than her NSMV, while a given man's PSMV is more likely to be lower than his NSMV. Did you hear the thunder? It appears a thunderstorm is coming. It's rather windy, and I was hoping to still do a good number of hours work outdoors, but it's starting to rain, which is no big deal in itself, but if it's really heavy and a thunder and lightning storm and heavy, strong winds come, well, that's just wonderful. The primacy of PSMV to the decision-making process is in the sexual marketplace gives rise to a whole suite of strategies designed to influence the perception of others. This is because there is no such thing as objective sexual marketplace value. There is only the value that exists in the minds of others. Ever since our ancient ancestors figured out that, at least some of the time, they could achieve the same outcome more cheaply and easily by seeming as opposed to being, we have been dealing with a host of behaviors ranging from bold-faced lies and deception to, let's say, playing to your strengths and putting your best foot forward. These are all degrees of lying, and everyone does it. Women lie when they wear makeup to look younger than they are. Men lie when they say they are looking for marriage and commitment in order to get a date. Women lie when they get implants or fillers to create curves they don't have. Men lie when they splurge on designer clothes and extravagant gifts they can't afford. Women lie when they play hard to get with men they like. Men lie when they pretend to care about women they don't even know. Women lie when they say they would never do that on a first date. Men lie when they say they're not looking to anyone else. Not talking to anyone else. Doesn't that sound amazing? Neither sex is above lying. Each just does so in its own way. And both do so because they believe that certain forms of lying will increase the chances of getting what they want by catering to what they think the other sex wants to see or hear. Through lying, men and women are often able to secure more desirable sexual opportunities more cheaply by allocating resources toward increasing PSMV, rather than towards increasing NSMV. This is possible because morality aside, lying works, at least for a while, and at least for some of the time. These gendered forms of lying do tend to make men and women more attractive, and they work according to the proposed mechanism of action by positively influencing PSMV. And this should come as no surprise. If these expressions of lying didn't work, they would have disappeared long ago. Down on the docks, things are not always what they seem to be. Another reason perceived sexual marketplace value, or PSMV, is important is because people have types or certain kinds of individuals to whom they are consistently attracted. Some people will swear up and down that they don't have a type, but their revealed preferences often tell a different story. More often than not, people's types are not completely in line with their given culture's paragons of attractiveness. As discussed in Chapter 1, this is often due to the idiosyncratic development of any given valuation algorithm. Some women like funny gingers with big butts. Some men like ambitious Asians with small hips. Personally, I tend to have a thing for cute nerds. None of these types comes remotely close to approximating the gendered archetypes on which NSMV is based, but each could serve as the exemplar against which a given individual standard for PSMV is measured. Sexuality is strange. One person's ick can be another person's young, and the sexual marketplace bears witness to a broad spectrum of taste, from likes and preferences on the one hand, to kinks and fetishes on the other. And this is why, down on the docks, it's important to shoot your shot. Ultimately, it's not the normative standards of the culture, NSMV, but the personal valuation of the individual PSMV that determines whether an interaction occurs and how it transpires. And while we are, more or less, collectively and while we all, more or less, collectively understand our culture's gendered archetypes of attractiveness, the standards of personal attraction are often locked up in the unconscious minds of the individuals in question. In any case, it's not only a mistake to conflate PSMV with NSMV, but also to assume your PSMV in the minds of others. Ultimately, since attraction is based on perception, if you believe that someone is out of your league, you're right. So the decision to initiate an interaction in the sexual marketplace is most directly influenced by perceived sexual marketplace value. Does this mean that SMV is completely relative or entirely subjective? Not at all. While the price of a cup of coffee at a neighborhood cafe may seem arbitrary if you zoom out far enough, say to the conceptualization of money as a fiat currency whose value is derived from the belief of those who use it, it is also rationally determined by reference to local market forces, most notably to the price of coffee at rival cafes. Value is an illusion constrained by reality. And, as we'll see, value operates in a similar fashion in the sexual marketplace, as it does in the commercial marketplace. The point of sale. Have you ever been flabbergasted at a modern art museum to learn that while a canvas painted white sold for 50 million fucking pounds? Have you ever been flabbergasted at a modern art museum to learn that a white canvas painted white sold for $50 million? Or rendered speechless when you found that someone is being paid $300 million to throw a ball a few times a year? Or dumbfounded to discover that a misprinted postage stamp can fetch 8 figures at auction? If you've ever shook your head at these or similar valuations and judged that they weren't worth their price tags, you're wrong. In every case, the commodity in question was worth exactly what was paid for it, no more, no less. This is extremely important to understand. Value is only created at the point of transaction. Until a transaction is executed, value remains entirely hypothetical. It becomes actual when the goods change hands. And once it does so, value becomes anchored at that price point. So an athlete who signs a $300 million contract is worth $300 million. If the same person could have signed a $500 million contract, he would have been worth $500 million. If only a $10 million contract, then only $10 million. The fact that someone believes the athlete in question is worth less than he was awarded is just as irrelevant as the fact that someone else might believe he is worth more than he accepted, including the athlete himself. He was worth exactly what he was paid, and until he was paid, no one, including the athlete himself, knew exactly what he was worth. The same holds true in the sexual marketplace. Value is created at the point of transaction, albeit it's slightly different ways for men and women. To differentiate it from other forms we've already discussed, we can call this transacted sexual marketplace value, or TSMV. Covers the third one. Transacted sexual marketplace value, TSMV. Transacted sexual marketplace value is the closest we can come to approximating an individual's true value in the sexual marketplace. Until the point of transaction, value is conjecture at best and self-delusion at worst. Transaction is the reality that constrains illusion. So how is TSMV calculated? In most sexual relationships, resources aren't explicitly exchanged for sexual opportunity, so the negotiated value at the point of transaction isn't as obvious here as it is in professional relationships. However, just as prices in the commercial marketplace are not determined by measuring the inherent value of the given commodity, whatever that is, but by examining the average price of comparable transactions in the market in question, we can develop a similar workaround for the sexual marketplace. Here it is. A man's transacted sexual marketplace value is the median normalized sexual marketplace value of the woman from whom he has secured sex. On the other hand, a woman's transacted sexual marketplace value is the median normalized sexual marketplace value of the men from whom she has secured commitment. Let's break this down. Transacted sexual marketplace value is always based on actual relationships, where the individuals have secured, as opposed to where they believe they could secure, the goods in question. And since the comparable transactions are the previous relationships of the individual under consideration, fewer potential confounds exist than in other methods of calculation. Finally, the averaging helps to equalize outliers in either direction to prevent skewing. The most significant feature of this definition, however, is the transaction standard against which men and women are differentially measured. Each sex is considered against the transaction that is more challenging for it to secure. It's harder for women to secure commitment from men than it is to secure sex. And it's harder for men to secure sex from women than it is to secure commitment. This is generally why we say that women are the gatekeepers of sex, and that men are the gatekeepers of commitment. It also goes a long way toward explaining why men generally seek sex from women and women generally seek commitment from men. Each is hoping to secure the scarcer and therefore relatively more valuable good from the other. I suppose the thunderstorm ain't coming. Just passing by on its way to Mount Fuji. Just had a brilliant idea. If I keep consistent with this, well, at some point when my channel grows too much, I won't be able to keep reading books because I'll get copyright issues. But then I'll just be reading from my own book and preaching my own message, making my own scripts and such. And it'll evolve as time goes as to what I share and do. But I just want to be consistent for now and share things with actual value. But anyway, when my channel grows so much, I can have my loyal fan base. They can send me cigars and they can send me coffee to try, like organic coffees and fresh coffees from the jungle and like jungle cigars as well. Like, I did actually try a jungle cigar the other day, huge, like better than a Cuban cigar. This guy swore by it, so it's the best cigars ever. And he would never, ever, ever smoke a cigar from a shop ever again. Even if people paid him $1 million, £1 million, he said, if someone tries to offer me £1 million to smoke a cigar, I'll never do it. I'll only smoke these cigars, which are from the jungle. And they smoked way cleaner than any of these things from the shop. It was like no additives, no harsh chemicals. It was like very pure tobacco, grown like actually in the jungle, not on a farm, not modified. It was great. Best cigar I've ever had. Anyhow, one day I'll grow my own tobacco and coffee trees and plants. No, why not? Why fuck not? Got some willow growing here which we'll work with. A lot of this is made to make baskets and coffins even. How did that dog hair get on my hat? Right then, where was I? It also goes a long way toward explaining why men generally seek sex from women and women generally seek commitment from men. Each is hoping to secure the scarcer and therefore relatively more valuable good from the other. That these are not the goods that each sex inherently prefers is demonstrated by observing the behavior of men and women when they have the typically scarcer good in abundance. Male celebrities eventually tire of playing the field and seek a meaningful connection. Married women grow bored of security and seek out passionate affairs. However, since many people do not experience this abundance, economic forces are often mystified as biological differences. Within this framework, we can also understand why many women suffer an inflated sense of their own sexual marketplace value. Many men would have sex with a woman to whom they would never seriously consider committing. As a result, it can happen that certain women are able to have sex with handsome, high-status men and believe, on the basis of these encounters, that they must enjoy a comparably high sexual marketplace value. However, since most of these men would be unlikely to offer commitment to the same woman, her value in this exchange isn't a reflection of the men's NSMV nearly as much as the men's value is a reflection of the woman's NSMV. In reality, the men who are likely to offer her commitment possess a lower NSMV than the men who can secure sex without it, as the former must compensate for being less attractive in other ways. This is why many women can encounter unexpected difficulties in securing marriage and long-term commitment after years of dating casually. They incorrectly believe the ease with which they have historically secured attractive sexual partners predicts an effortlessness in finding an attractive husband. So that's my best attempt at approximating the actual value of men and women in the sexual marketplace. For men, For men, it's the median NSMV of the woman from whom they have secured sex, and for women, it's the medium NSMV of the men from whom they have secured commitment. And since this definition obviously utilizes an asymmetrical metric, I might as well explain everyone's favorite double standard before closing the chapter of locks and keys. I am, of course, referring to the sexual double standard. The sexual double standard is the belief that it is acceptable or positive for men to have had many previous sexual partners, but that it is unacceptable or negative for women to have had the same. On the surface, this appears hypocritical and unfair. However, in many respects, it is simply par for the course. In the sexual marketplace, asymmetry is the rule, not the exception. What is equal isn't always fair, and what is unfair isn't always unequal. Let's take a closer look. A popular explanation of this double standard is that is an unfortunate cultural artifact, a vestige of a patriarchal past that simultaneously glorified men's sexual conquest of women while constraining women's sexual freedom. And while there may be some truth to that, allow me to offer another explanation of this phenomenon that it doesn't require quite as many ideological assumptions. It goes like this: the outcome that can be accomplished through no action will always be valued less than the outcome that can only be achieved through the application of effort and skill. This is inherently true. People don't become stronger, richer, wiser, or more desirable by doing nothing. They attain these valuable attributes through the application of effort and skill. And all other things being equal, the more applied effort and skill, the greater the value. This is why a cake will cost more than the sum of the cost of its ingredients. The effort and skill applied to the ingredients make the finished product a more valuable commodity. Reasonable enough, right? Now let's apply this principle to the topic under consideration. If a man does nothing, he does not have sex. The average guy can sit alone at a bar, day after day, week after week, month after month, and he will be approached by no one. And while there are pros and cons to this reality, the fact is that a man cannot enter into a sexual relationship by waiting until it is offered. Vanishingly few contexts exist in which male virginity is prized, so it can't really be celebrated. This is because a man can do nothing and remain a virgin, so it can't really be celebrated. For a man to acquire and retain a sexual partner, which is to say, for a man to be sexually selected by a woman, more effort and skill are required than we would generally like to admit. Now compare this to the experience of a woman. How long would she be able to sit alone at a bar undisturbed? This woman may not be approached by the person she would prefer to be approached by. However, sooner or later, she will likely be approached by someone with some kind of proposal, ranging from "can I buy you a drink" to "want to get out of here." In fact, some women are propositioned in both direct and indirect ways, many times a day, nearly every day of their lives. If we include digital propositions via dating apps or social media platforms, this number can grow exponentially. Women can even be propositioned without being aware that they are being propositioned. Stark symmetries exist between the experiences of men and women. If you fancy sending me some cigars or coffee in the post, or a new book that I should read, feel free. Or if you want to order a cigar, that'd be beneficial, and then I can use the money to buy cigars and coffee and books. And these asymmetries collectively produce an unavoidable consequence, namely that there are gendered differences in the application of effort and skill in the sexual marketplace. For instance, surrendering to every man who would have her doesn't require nearly as much effort and skill from a woman as, say, appropriately vetting her options and discerning the men who might be the best investments for her necessarily limited time and opportunity. Discernment is a skill that requires some degree of knowledge, experience, and savviness. Because it requires effort and skill not to believe every Tom, Dick, and Harry who crosses her path with a proposition. Value is created by a woman's reticence. So the situation is, unsurprisingly, complementary. For men, action is generally required to make something happen, and for women, inaction is generally needed to prevent the squandering of her resources. This is especially true for people in their 20s, in the case of both men and women. The outcome associated with effort and skill is valued more highly than the outcome that is not. However, since effort and skill are typically applied by men and women to achieve different outcomes, this gives rise to the apparent double standard under discussion. But here's the kicker. This isn't inherent to men and women. Rather, it's an emergent phenomenon that arises wherever value is unequally distributed. For instance, you find an analogous situation when dealing with the unequal distribution of money. Those with no money have to hustle to get it, while those with money have to find a way to resist squandering it on every two-bit investment opportunity that comes their way. You even find this phenomenon naturally occurring in sports that deal with the unequal distribution of points. Those with fewer points shift to offense, and those with more points shift to defense, and these shifts generally become more pronounced in inverse proportion of to the available time. The upshot is that, in any game, the player at the disadvantage is insensitized in the direction of acquisition, while the player at an advantage is insensitized in the direction of maintenance. And given the relative distribution of normalized value in the sexual marketplace, especially among younger cohorts, women are decidedly the more advantaged players. As a consequence, men are insensitized into an offensive role and play to win, and are rewarded for doing so, since skill and effort are required for this outcome, whereas women are insensitized into a defensive role and play not to lose, and are rewarded for doing so, since skill and effort are required for this outcome. So the sexual double standard stands in culturally determined so the sexual double standard is culturally determined, but not in the way that most people think. That is, it's not simply a superficial attitude, like a belief, that can be altered with education and awareness. Rather, it's deeply embedded in culturally normative rules that govern who approaches whom and who is valued for what. And these rules probably aren't changing anytime soon. The sexual double standard will privilege men as long as women are perceived to be more valuable in the sexual marketplace, until the day arrives when it is as easy for the average man to find a willing sexual partner as it is for the average woman to do the same. The sexual double standard will exist. A key that can open any lock will remain a good key, and a lock that any key can open will remain a bad lock. Let me say that again, because that does it. That's the cherry on top. A key that can open any lock will remain a good key, and a lock that any key can open will remain a bad lock. In this chapter, I discussed several conceptualizations of sexual marketplace value. This detour was necessary because, like it or not, these valuations have a profound influence on all three stages of relationships. All other things being equal, a person with a high sexual marketplace value will attract more desirable partners for mating and dating, negotiate more preferential relationship terms, and maintain relationships more successfully against intersexual competition, relative to a person with lower SMV. Furthermore, an individual's perceived sexual marketplace value does more to determine whether an interaction occurs that could lead to a sexual opportunity than any other single factor. What is written here is far from the whole story. but it will have to serve for now. At this point, let's assume there is sufficient initial mutual attraction to motivate an interaction in the sexual marketplace. While each party's PSMV will continue to fluctuate in the other's mind as the interaction unfolds, the two have functionally entered into the negotiation stage of the relationship. As we'll see, this stage is exceedingly nuanced and involved. Learning to play this phase of the game well will dramatically improve an individual's bargaining posture once the proposal becomes explicit. If you'd like to further explore the topics presented in this chapter, please scan the QR code to access a curated playlist on the Psycaps channel on YouTube. It might be worth me trying to scan it and get a link to that playlist potentially, and then I could put that in the description below so you could check out some of his content. Yeah, I'm gonna see if I can work on that. But yeah, that's that. Anyway, chapter 3 complete. On to chapter 4 next. Thank you for tuning in. I hope you have enjoyed today's video. We had special guest Isaac, my dog, and Thunder in the sky, and Alfred, the sheepskull, today. A cigar a day keeps the doctor away. A coffee a day keeps the tiredness at bay. Peace out. Have a good day or night.